So I want to talk a little bit about the whole hypocrisy surrounding Julian Assange and Navalny. There's a stark contrast in the way that not just Western media, but Western officials, leaders, politicians, prominent figures are addressing these two cases, right? And because the consensus is what? Is that, well, Navalny is a political prisoner. So is Julian Assange, right? And I'd argue Julian Assange exponentially more so. And there's a huge difference in the way they're being treated. Now, the starkest difference here comes straight from the Australian foreign minister, because as you recall, Julian Assange is an Australian citizen. He's not British, even though he's rotting away in a UK maximum security prison in Belmarsh, nor is he American, right? Even though the US wants to jail him for 175 years. I think that's the quintessential example of a political prisoner, right? When you're being hunted by half the globe, that pretty much makes you the political prisoner. So I just want to show you a statement here from Maurice Payne. She's the Australian foreign minister. Okay, take a look at what she says. She says here regarding Navalny, Australia is deeply concerned by Russian authorities' arrest and subsequent sentencing of Alexei Navalny to 2 years and 8 months imprisonment. The European Court of Human Rights concluded that Mr. Navalny's 2014 conviction, which was used as grounds for his current detention, was unlawful and politically motivated. We call for Mr. Navalny's immediate and unconditional release. Very clear. When is this issued? 3rd of February, 2021. Just a month earlier, 5th of January, 2021, here's her statement on Julian Assange. We note the UK court's decision in relation to the application to extradite Mr. Julian Assange to the United States, which the court has made on the grounds of his mental health and consequent suicide risk. Australia is not a party to the case and will continue to respect the ongoing legal process. Now that is very, very different from we call for Mr. Navalny's immediate and unconditional release. Why aren't you calling for Julian Assange's immediate and unconditional release? He's an Australian citizen. You're the Australian foreign minister. It's your job to go and defend him, as Australia's government has done in the past for other Australian journalists and political dissidents in other countries, right? What are you doing? Also, she notes down here, I don't know if you can see this. She says, we have made 19 offers of consular assistance to Mr. Assange since 2019 that have gone unanswered. Now, if you look over here, Stella Morris, who's Julian Assange's partner and the mother of his 2 children, she says Julian hasn't refused consular assistance. But regardless, consular assistance won't cut it. She's probably right. So I don't know what that is, if that's true or not, that they've made 19 offers. I don't know if that's true. But you can tell from the language, there is a huge difference. I mean, this is unmistakable. That's not a small difference no, they're not mincing words here. They say, we call for Mr. Navalny's immediate and unconditional release. Jesus Christ, you would think Navalny is an Australian citizen, perhaps, right? No. Is Australia a party to the case? Because look, in the case of Julian Assange, she says, hey, we have nothing to do with that. Australia is not a party to the case. Yes, you are. You whether you like it or not, that he's an Australian citizen, you are very much a party to the case. And if you're going to say that about Julian Assange, who's your own citizen, how can you not say that about Navalny? Again, this is not even 1 month apart. It's very clear. It's unmistakable. There's an agenda going on here. And I mean, when you realize that Australia is essentially a vassal state of the United States right now, it's being used essentially as a military base to ward off, to fend off China, to be a thorn in their side, right? That's one aspect. This is another aspect of it, right? This is another aspect where you see the Australian government is ready to abandon one of its own because the United States says so, right? So when it comes to Russia, now we care about political witch hunts, right? Because it's beneficial for, the Russophobic narrative. It's beneficial for, U.S. foreign policy to toe this line and say these kinds of things. But for someone who challenges U.S. hegemony like Julian Assange, oh no, we're not a party to the case. Don't you love that? Look how they sell out one of their own. That's just vile. And again, this is just the Australian foreign minister. I say just, it's actually the worst because she has a diplomatic responsibility to lobby for his release, especially as a foreign minister. But just to show you some more of the hypocrisy, okay? Just to show you some more hypocrisy, look at this. So here's Bernie Sanders. He says, for the second week in a row, thousands of brave Russians took to the streets to protest the corrupt rule of Putin and his thieving oligarchs. Unjustly imprisoned activists, including Alexei Navalny, must be released. This is from February 1st, right? There's another one no, that's Boris. There's another one from Bernie afterwards. Here's Dominic Raab. So Raab is the foreign secretary for the UK. He says the UK calls for the immediate and unconditional release of Navalny and all of the peaceful protesters and journalists arrested over the last 2 weeks. Really? You care about journalism all of a sudden? Really? This guy works at Whitehall, right? Whitehall is, 20 minutes away from the Old Bailey where Julian Assange is being tried. You care now about journalists? Boris Johnson as well, the UK Prime Minister, talking about Navalny. Oh, he's so brave. It was a truly brave and selfless act. Wow. Navalny must be released immediately. Really? What are you doing? What are you doing about Julian Assange? Here's the Swedish PM's office. Reiterate EU call for Alexei Navalny's immediate release. Russia must comply with its international obligations, including respecting human rights. Wow. Were you doing that? Were you doing that when you were persecuting Assange on behalf of the UK government, which was uncovered? Here's Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister. We strongly condemn Russia's imprisonment of Alexei Navalny. Here's a letter by several members of parliament in the UK. Look, they all signed this, calling for Navalny's release. Amazing, right? Jen Psaki, the spokesman for the White House, right? She calls for Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny's immediate and unconditional release. And of course, I already gave you Payne's position. Here's Secretary Blinken. There's no surprise. I don't expect anything from the US Secretary of State. So, oh, and by the way, Greta Thunberg, look what she says. So in the year of 2021, Europe chooses to meet its energy demand by building a pipeline to transport more fossil fuels from the one responsible for this. Shameful on so many levels. Wow. Oh, she's good, huh? She's good. You see, I think that, first of all, before I get into that, I think there's kind of an irony here that, especially someone who's concerned with climate would not be extremely and vehemently outspoken and advocate on Julian Assange's behalf, right? As you all know, the US military is one of the world's largest polluters, right? That's a statistical fact. They have so many fuel guzzling warships and planes, and just, the logistical supply chain demands that they use so much fuel. They're one of the world's largest polluters, not to mention the fact that half, if not all of these goddamn wars are over oil, are over resources, right? I mean, if you're a climate activist, holy shit, the US military should be on your fucking top 5 list of enemies. Jesus Christ. Not a word. Not a word about Julian Assange, who is easily, arguably, one of the US empire's biggest detractors and adversaries, who's actually done journalism that is genuinely challenged their authority and exposed the wars in Afghanistan, exposed the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and as failures and their torture programs. I mean, you would be praising Julian Assange, right? I think there's a valid argument to be made there. But nonetheless, she's talking about the pipeline, right? Because Russia and Germany had this deal to build the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, right? So, of course, you have I think Ben Norton is the one who posted about this. Yeah, I think Ben posted about the fact that, now you had all of a sudden Germany, the US putting pressure on them to cancel this pipeline, right? And this is also something going back a few months. Actually, it goes back a long time. If you remember, Mike Pompeo was doing a tour in Europe a few months ago in October. No, it was August. And, he doesn't go to Germany. He goes to all the countries around Germany. And in diplomacy and international affairs, that's sending a message, right? That's sending a message. I think he went to Vienna, he went to Austria, he went to Poland, he went to all of the countries surrounding Germany, right? But not to Germany. Why? Because the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, America does not want Germany building an oil pipeline with Russia, right? They don't want that. They're also the subject of Huawei. So Mike Pompeo was essentially going to all these countries and telling them, hey, you don't bring any Chinese products, don't get involved with Huawei, don't get involved with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, basically keeping Russia and China at bay. And so over here, right, Angela Merkel, German chancellor, she condemned the expulsion of diplomats over Navalny's protests. Now, this was actually very interesting, right? This was very interesting. Oh yeah, here's the one I was talking about with Ben Norton. So you see, Ben Norton says the alleged quote-unquote poisoning of Navalny was 2% approval and poses no threat to Moscow, is extremely suspicious, and it's having its intended impact, trying to stop the Russian-German Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which the U.S. said it would do anything to stop. So it's wonderful seeing Thunberg take that side, right? But anyway, just to talk about this right here, this headline with the expulsion of diplomats. So this was incredible, right? You had the media saying, "Oh my God, look at what happened with Navalny. People are taking to the streets, and there's outrage and uproar." And of course, I never saw any cameras at the vigils for Assange, right? I never saw any of those, even though those take place every week. But yeah, all of a sudden they're covering all these mass protests in Russia. And what's interesting is that you had the U.S. Embassy in Moscow posting protest routes online. And you had diplomats, German diplomats, and other European diplomats participating in the protests. Now, I need to explain something to you, man. That's bad. That's really bad. And this is not new. You've seen this behavior before. If you look at what happened in Lebanon, right, last year, well, now we're in 2021. But last year, when they had these, at the end of 2019, they had all these protests in Beirut and Saht al-Shuhada, and these anti-government, anti-corruption protests. You also had the U.S. embassy over there supporting them, right? And you could argue that they're legitimate because you definitely have corruption in Lebanon, but it's not the job of an embassy to get involved in the domestic affairs of another country. Do you understand? That's extremely rude at best. That's at best. And in Syria, at the start of the civil war, as they call it, right? The war on Syria, you had the U.S. ambassador, Rob Ford, out in the streets with the protesters. That's not your job. You're meddling in the internal affairs of a country now, right? You're taking a side. You're actually demonstrating and showing support to overthrow the government that is hosting you. Like, again, it's rude at best. It's this is meddling in another country's affairs. That's outside the purview of a diplomatic mission. You're not supposed to do that. Just like put this in a perspective. Can you imagine if the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. was telling people, oh yeah, take this route to the capital and avoid this one. And, you see Russian diplomats out in the street at the insurrection. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine Syrian diplomats doing that, or Lebanese diplomats? And okay, we don't have to say insurrection. We don't have to, take it to that scale. But I mean, it's essentially what it is, right? You want to look at Syria and tell me that was better or milder? It's way worse, right? This also calls to overthrow the government. You had the fucking U.S. ambassador out in the street with people trying to overthrow the government. I mean, think about that for a second. What would the United States do? Would that not be condemned by half the planet? So why is it okay for European diplomats, Western diplomats to do that in other countries? It's not your job. You're not allowed to do that. That's outside your purview. You understand? So anyway, I just wanted to make that little parentheses on that. But, and this is not even getting into the right-wing racist shit that Navalny has said. But, if we're arguing, I'm trying to argue, I'm trying to demonstrate to you the hypocrisy here from Western officials and Western media, right? When it comes to a figure who's, backed by the West because he's against Putin. Oh, now he's a hero. They whitewash all of his racist shit that he said against, immigrants and against Muslims, and the skinhead marches with neo-Nazis. They don't even mention that. Most people have no clue about that. They say, oh, there are mass protests. They make the case for him, right? And portray him as some kind of hero. Because why? Why? Because he's a political prisoner. But when it comes to Julian Assange, who's also a political prisoner, silence, radio silence. It's incredible. I mean, we're talking about one of the most famous journalists on the fucking planet. Okay? Who's really challenged power structures in the West. And he was being persecuted in the middle of London, in central London. Nothing. Where was all this outcry from Bernie Sanders? Where was Greta Thunberg? Where was the Swedish Prime Minister? Where was Justin Trudeau? Where was Boris Johnson? Where was Dominic Raab? Where was Bernie Sanders? Where were all these politicians? Where was the EU when it came to Julian Assange? Yes, Julian Assange does have lots of international support. He has support from lawyers for Assange, doctors for Assange. There are so many organizations that have called for his release. I know. But Bernie Sanders won't even say his name. Have you seen a joint letter from members of parliament in the UK calling for Julian Assange to be released? If Dominic Raab, the foreign secretary, and the Prime Minister Boris Johnson care so much about journalists, why are they letting Julian Assange be persecuted like that? What is he doing in Belmarsh prison? Have you seen any of that agency on his behalf? No, you haven't. And you know why? Because Julian Assange is a threat to U.S. empire. He's a threat to the United States and their allies. Because he exposes them for what they are. Criminals, thieves, imperialists. That's why. And, just the fact that you can go online and, you can find images. Look, you can find images of Navalny in court and videos. Can you do that with Julian Assange? Can you find any videos of Julian Assange in court? Are there any videos or photographs of Julian Assange when he was sentenced to 50 weeks in jail in 2019 after he was dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy? Is there any video of his extradition hearing right now in the fall and autumn of 2020 at the Old Bailey? Or before that in February, before we had the COVID? Was there any video of his verdict in January this year? They keep telling you that, oh my God, Russia is so repressive. Putin, he's a dictator, and all political dissidents are killed and executed. Why would he allow cameras and the press to come to his arch enemy, as whatever the Wall Street Journal calls him? Why, if he's such a dictator? You had more transparency in Navalny's trial than you did at Julian Assange in the middle of London. Explain that to me. Dude, I was there in the court. You couldn't even take, you could take like a pen and a paper, right? That's it. No electronics, nothing, no press. There was no live stream. You can watch the trial. There's no video of it. And they tell you, oh my God, the United Kingdom, it's a beacon of democracy, right? It's a pioneer of the modern legal system, right? You had the Bill of Rights, not your Bill of Rights in the US, way before that, right? You had the Bill of Rights, you had habeas corpus, they turned an absolute monarchy into a parliamentary constitutional monarchy. I mean, this is a myth when you come down and look at reality. It's a myth. It doesn't apply to real dissidents. It's not there. We're in 2021. It's not there. You had more transparency in Putin's courts, as they like to say, right? In the Russian courts with Navalny than you did with Julian Assange in the middle of London. What does that tell you? What does that say about so-called European democracy or British democracy or Americans, right? Since the United States is the one pursuing and sanctioning this endeavor. What does that say? Huh? It means they're hypocrites. That's what it says. They're absolute hypocrites. And mind you, despite him being a political prisoner, I mean, the sentences here are incomparable. Navalny's sentenced 2.5 years. Julian Assange is facing 175. 175. And to boot, he's a journalist, right? So of course you have political prisoners of all sorts, but especially a journalist, someone whose job it is to be the so-called fourth estate. Jesus Christ. I mean, those are two crimes in one. Not to mention the fact they affront on his personal health, the extraterritorialization. I mean, what's next? The UK is going to kidnap journalists. It's like in Germany next. I mean, what's going to happen here? What kind of precedent is setting? It is so much wrong with this. There's so much wrong with this. And the hypocrisy could not be clearer. The entire media establishment, the entire media class and political establishment in the United States, in the UK, in Europe, they're completely silent on Julian Assange's persecution, the fact he's been rotting away in Belmarsh prison for 1.5 years now, the fact that he's facing 175 years in a federal supermax in the United States, the fact that he's already been arbitrarily detained for 10 years now. They're silent. They don't say a word. Bernie Sanders won't even say his name. Andrew Yang, right, the progressive, he was saying Julian Assange should stand trial in the US. Who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? Julian Assange is not American. He doesn't owe you shit. And that guy was calling himself a progressive. That's the progressive position. The progressives are silent on one of the most prominent journalists in the world who challenges empire. This is criminal. It's scandalous behavior. This is scandalous. Absolutely scandalous. And then they have the stones to call themselves democracies or liberal democracies and claim that they're better than Russia and whatnot. Really? Not really, when it comes down to it, are you? They teach you like, oh, yes, boy, we're quite civilized. Yes, we're quite civilized bunch, aren't we? Yes, we revolutionized the legal system. We have a parliament. They're very proud of their constitutional monarchy, right? The fact that you had habeas corpus, you had a Bill of Rights. You remember the UK doesn't have a constitution. It just has a bunch of documents, okay? There's no constitution. So nonetheless, they're very proud. And the UK colonized 1/5 actually of the planet, 25% of the world's surface and population. In what? Under what guise, right? Oh, the white man, the white colonizer from Britain is more advanced. He thinks he's more civilized. He thinks that his system is more fair and more just, and he knows better. And that's why he has to go and colonize the rest of the planet. Of course, it's not just about that. They're stealing. They're plundering. But there's also a racial, there's this an element of superiority to it, right? This brainwashing. And to this day, you have tons of people thinking, yeah, the empire is something to be missed. So, where is that? How does that translate into reality? It doesn't. It doesn't, because I saw it in my own eyes, right? I was there at the Old Bailey, and you had 5 people allowed in the gallery, right? And they tell you it's because of COVID. Okay, well, hold on a second. Why didn't you just let people look at, watch the trial, observe the trial online? Julian Assange's extradition hearing took place in the England and Wales Central Criminal Court, also known as the Old Bailey. Dude, this is in the city of London. It's in central London. Just from the name, I'm telling you, it's the Central Criminal Court. There's no excuse whatsoever that this trial, and the judge decided on purpose to limit media access. And on the first day, if you remember, on the first day of the trial, so what is this, September 7th, 2020? There were like around 40 NGOs, observers, MEPs who had their access revoked all of a sudden. How can you do that? Based on what? What is your excuse to do that? How do you call that open justice? How can you come and tell me that your system is fair? How can you come and tell me that this is a democracy with a functioning independent judiciary? It's not. It's being run by the United States. This is a mockery. This is actually an insult. If British people actually really respected their own country, they would be outraged that the United States is running their own court in such a way. Not to mention the fact that it's an affront on press freedoms, right? Not to mention that. So you can't come and tell me this, man. And you have activists who have to line up at 5 a.m. Again, God bless them, to get everyone who couldn't get in, right? So What is that, man? You're going to come here and tell me that that's a functioning democracy, that you care about journalists and press freedoms? Fucking hypocrites. This is intolerable. It's scandalous. And you know, it's really disgusting that you see all these political figures. Oh, they're outraged about Navalny. Okay, fine. You claim you care about political prisoners and witch hunts, and you're against that. What about Julian Assange? Oh, we don't care. They're turning a blind eye. Julian who? This is impermissible. It's intolerable, and I completely reject this. And I think it's scandalous that they act in such a way. I really do. I think it's shameful. And again, keep in mind, you're seeing this from all of them. All of them. The British, the Americans, the Germans, the Swedes, all of Europe. And just keep in mind, which countries are actually behind all of this imperialism and plundering and theft of resources and killing. It's the same ones, incidentally. And that's exactly why they hate Assange, because he exposed their empire for what it is. That's what WikiLeaks did, right? And it's interesting, you know, it's interesting. You see, just, I'm at a loss for words, man. I'm really angered at this. I'm really angered at this. The mainstream media, you know what they did? The mainstream media, they would come they would milk any kind of like controversy from Assange's extradition hearing for clickbait, right? So, for example, there's a thing about the Trump pardon. They completely lied about that. They claimed that, you know, Trump was offering Assange a pardon for him to lie and say that Russia was not the source. Dude, that's not the same thing. We know Russia was not the source for the DNC leaks, because Julian said it wasn't a state actor. Okay. But Julian refused to betray the source. And you know, he didn't take the deal. But the media came out and said, oh, you see, look, he's covering for Trump. What the fuck are you talking about? They made that up. And then they also played on the thing with his mental health, right? They sensationalized that. And then, you know, you'd see like some Sky News correspondent like come on the last fucking day or when there was the verdict, and like they don't even know the judge's name. I mean, just sloppy, just pathetic, honestly. And they call that coverage. So that's just disgusting. And, you know, of course, with Navalny, they give that full attention, and, you know, it's just horrendous. It's horrendous.